This is the Friday Rugby Preview on Borders Rugby Radio with Stuart Cameron.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Rugby Preview. I'm Stuart Cameron. With me this week is Dale Clancy, previewing the weekend's fixtures involving Borders teams, and hopefully we will get some rugby tomorrow. If you're listening to us outside the Scottish borders, I can tell you that the weather's been rather chilly, to say the least, not getting too much above freezing, so some pitches will be frozen and we fully expect some games to be off. So check our Twitter feed at Borders Rugby for latest news of call-offs, and of course on our homepage at bordersrugby.net, where we'll be constantly updating things. And indeed, by the time you listen to this show, some of the games we're previewing could well be off. So that's the disclaimer out of the way. Let's bring in Dale Clancy, and we'll start with our commentary match, which is supposed to be Gala against Ayr at Netherdale, weather permitting. And it's been quite a few weeks for Gala. 3 heavy losses, and then this week the departure of Stuart Johnson as head coach and Bill Noble away too as director of rugby. So things not going too well for the Maroons. What's your own take on the story?
I think we were obviously at the Melrose game a few weeks back at the Green Yards when it was an eerie weekend anyway, with the news of Doddie after the full-time whistle, but they were on the receiving end of an absolute hammering that day. Melrose looked really on point. They were really accurate in their attack and their intense in their defence, and Gala just looked a little bit flat. And I think going back to the Ayr game, originally away from home, they were as another heavy defeat, and it's at the end of the day, it's an amateur club. This is amateur community club rugby, but something's not working for Gala, so they've used this opportunity to try and press the reset button and give it a little shake up. And obviously Craig Dodds and Ewan Dodds are going to be in interim charge in the meantime, looking after the club, so that's the way it's going to be. But obviously they've just looked at things, want to try and shake it up a little bit and try and get some form back into it, because really from last season it was looking really promising, almost getting into the Premiership and then losing out by a point. This season's probably not going to script.
I was going to say, because that was the aim, wasn't it? They got so close last year that they thought, well, this is our year this year, and it started really, really well, and then it's kind of they've fallen off the horse a wee bit. And Kelso, Melrose, and Ayr, of course, playing so well this season as well. You can't afford to lose.
I'm not going to sit here and speak about the coaching setup or any changes, but there was a change in coach, and Stuart Johnson's taken over, and he's been a great contributor to what we do, and hopefully he finds something else in the future and settles in. But there's obviously needed to be a change. The only thing that you look at in terms of the squads is Gala's didn't change too much after last year. Melrose has got stronger. Kelso's has arguably got stronger as well, and they've managed to retain a lot of the players that they maybe lost last year. A lot of players were injured. A lot can change in a season, and even it might just be a matter of you get a little bit more luck. You don't have as many injuries, and I feel that Gala they've almost compounded misery with injuries, a bit of bad form, some heavy results, losing key personnel, and then all of a sudden it culminates in this. But they do have an opportunity this weekend to probably, if anything, the players would justify the decision by putting in a performance, or it continues as it is, and the problem might be a little bit deeper rooted.
It is sad to hear this kind of thing, but it's part of the game. It's already, we've seen Bruce Rutherford depart Southern Knights, now Stuart Johnson, and I have to say Stuart's been fantastic to us, giving us plenty of time throughout the season and given some really good insights into the workings behind the scene. But things move on, and we hear now from Ewan Dodds, who's going to be having an impact on the coaching setup. Here's what he has to say about matters ahead of the Ayr game tomorrow.
Ayr are the visitors to Netherdale on Saturday, where we return after 3 extremely difficult matches on the road, where results and performances have fell well below the expectations of us as a club. We've made multiple changes to the team where we look to get a reaction and restore a bit of pride in the jersey, which has definitely been lacking over the last few weeks. In the front row, Jack Williamson makes his first start of the season, and Jack Eason returns from suspension to partner Glenn Brough. In the back row, James Glendinning returns following a period of illness last weekend. In the back line, Harris Rutherford returns to standoff, with Craig Dodds returning to 12. And we also welcome Murray Wilson back for the first time this season at 13, following a long layoff with injury. Scott Peppers moves from standoff to his normal position of fullback. On the bench, we welcome Marcus Brogan for the first time, who joined us for Hoyk a few weeks ago but has been out injured, so we look to see an impact for him coming from the bench. We also have Douglas Weir and Kyle Scott, who will also be looking to make a wee bit of an impact. And in the backs, Keith Young and Callum Pate will be on the bench. As we said, we're looking for a much improved performance, and it all starts on Saturday.
So plenty of changes inevitably, and of course still a large amount of injuries.
Yeah, but I think that there was a lot of telling things in what Ewan said. He started off by saying that, you know, they've made a lot of changes. So obviously there's been a disagreement. There's been, you know, maybe selection's has been one of the teething issues of Gala this season. I think Rutherford back at 10's a brilliant selection. Nice to see Glendinning coming back in as well. But the introduction of Brogan on the bench could be a really key asset for Gala, because we watched him when they played, when Hoyk Youth played West of Scotland last season at Volunteer Park in Hoyk. They came up short, but he's an articulate young fellow. He's a good leader. So hopefully he, you know, gets a little bit of a good introduction to senior rugby. And you can see there's a frustration, but there's changes that are afoot that they want to try and have some sort of, as Ewan said on multiple occasions, some sort of impact, which is exactly what they need. And they're obviously trying to reshuffle the pack slightly to make that achievable.
Well, we'll come back to National 1 shortly and look at Melrose and Kelso, but let's switch to the Premiership, and the Hoyk bandwagon rolls on unbeaten, and a trip to Goldenacre to face Heriot's Blues. Here's head coach Matty Douglas.
The challenge this week is to back up last week's performance. I think that, you know, we had a bit chat on Tuesday night during analysis, and the players are keen to back that up this week. And look, I thought last Saturday was our best performance of the season. You can't talk about performances, but look at just on the whole in terms of attack and defensively, you know, the intent that we had to just keep getting off the line and making tackles was really good. And I thought our kicking game really put Accies under pressure. So yeah, I look really happy, but that's gone. We now move on to Heriot's on Saturday, who are a team that have got better week by week, and they'll be looking to, you know, to finish before Christmas strongly at home. And Goldenacre's a tough place to go. You know, I think Hoyk struggled in the past there, and we know how tough a place it can be to win. And look, we're going to have to be at our best. We're going to have to bring it our individual performances again, and hopefully that comes together collectively. And look, if we get structure and the game plan right, and bring the same kind of mindset that we had on Saturday past, then we'll hopefully be on the right end of the result. But that's the big challenge, is not dropping off in intensity. You know, we went to Musselburgh and we're pretty flat. So look, that's the big one for us this week, is just backing it up. And kind of team news, not much to report. Starting team stays the same. I think maybe I'm right in saying that's the first time this season we've been able to put the same starting team out, you know, following the week before's game, which is, you know, brings a bit of consistency in selection. And then on the bench, just one change, Stuart Graham drops out and comes Sean Fairbairn. So yeah, kind of rewarding a lot of the players for performances last week. And yeah, there's a lot of players waiting for the jersey and waiting for an opportunity. And you know, over the next couple of weeks and after Christmas, there will be opportunities there, and it's about how the players grab them and cement that jersey for their own. But yeah, look, this is another, I say it every week, but it's another must win. Keep the momentum going and keep putting pressure on teams around us to keep picking up points.
Matty riding on the crest of a wave and putting over 40 points past both their main contenders, that's Curry and Edinburgh Accies this season. That's a big statement.
Yeah, firstly I'd like to thank him for tying two empty bean cans together with a bit of string, because obviously it's a bit of a dodgy line. But we were at the Hoyt game at the weekend against Edinburgh Accies, and they were a complete class above. The physicality, the intensity that they brought to that game, they were a class act. And they're fortunate this season that they do have that strength and depth in the squad. I think you know, dropping out Stuart Graham to bring in Fairbairn is a lovely headache to have for a coach. But you always go back to the other players that are perhaps looking to scratch to get themselves back into the team. But Matty Douglas said it there, and I could not agree with him more. He was rewarding the players that put in a performance at the weekend, because that was as clinical as you're going to see in the Premiership. You know, obviously I've seen there is a lot of stuff on social media about the kind of level that they're at, but that it was a very professional, polished performance, which I think is, it does benefit having those players who have had higher experience come back into the team. But they've absolutely blew them away, and they've made it a 2-horse race at the top now to get those home ties. It's just about consistency. So almost, from now to the end of the season, or the end of the regular season anyway, they can probably only beat themselves. There'll be competitive games in there, but they've put themselves in such a good position to go into these final few games with a bit of confidence, try and get that home advantage, and then it's knockout rugby after that.
Now, you hinted just there about someone tweeting the other day that Hawick would be competitive as a Super 6 team with their current squad. Now, you've been obviously commentating for Super 6 last season, and you've seen all the teams in action. What are your own thoughts? Because many of the squad have the Super 6 experience. You've got the likes of Andrew Mitchell and Daniel Sudden, Fraser Rennick and Dalton Redpath as well, just 4 of them, plus young players who have age group experience at Scotland international level. So, I mean, they're a great team. How would they fit in, though, in a Super 6 environment?
I did read it. I seen it, and I did see that you commented on it. And I can't argue with some of it, but I do look at it, take it with a little bit of pinch of salt, because I do think they could be able to compete against Stirling County and Southern Knights, definitely. I think as you start going up the table a little bit, there is a bit of a gap. As we were alluded to earlier on, I don't think they could live with Ayr and Watsonians at all. If you watch that final, the level of rugby, the quality, how the longevity of the players that were able to go the full distance, it was just a little bit too far. So,
because a lot of this is to do with conditioning and things, isn't it?
Yeah, these players in Super 6 are dedicating a lot more time to their rugby than some of the players in the Premiership are able to do, because Dalton Redpath's got a very successful business. He dedicates most of his time towards that and keeps himself in great condition out with, and he's still a great rugby player. But sometimes that's the amateur era coming back into it a little bit. Now, I do not argue with the fact that I think they would have given the Knights in Stirling a good game. You could have potentially argued the case about Heriots as well, but I think the other three, they would have found it difficult. But let's not take away the fact that what Hawick are trying to do is win the Premiership crown for the first time since 2002, and they put themselves on a good path to do that, and the players that they've got are exceptional. The squad is brilliant. Matty Douglas is doing a great job as head coach, and for Hawick, I hope that they manage to continue going. But it'll be great for us as well, because there might be a point where we're coming to a playoff semi-final, and it could be a potential that we could have Hawick and Selkirk in the final. It could be a semi-final. We could have 2 ties on at the same day, head to head, that we're going to cover. So it's great to see 2 teams up there anyway. But Hawick are, they're playing some brilliant stuff.
Now, Selkirk in the playoff positions at the moment, amazingly unbeaten away from home, and they've beaten some big clubs as well, like Mar, Glasgow Hawks and Jed Forest, plus that draw on day 1 at Mansfield Park against Hawick. So here are the thoughts of Selkirk's head coach Scott White as they head to the capital to take on Edinburgh Accies.
Really disappointing result last week. I think there was obviously a few personnel missing, but we've sat down and reviewed the game on Tuesday night, and we've actually created 20 try scoring opportunities and only converted 4 of them. So I think that tells a huge tale, and the biggest concern for me was if we weren't creating chances. We looked back at Saturday, we've created probably enough chances to win 2 or 3 games, and that's probably the main stat that we'll probably take out of it, that Musselburgh are far more clinical than us, which is obviously disappointing, obviously given the season they've had. But look, fair play to them, they came down, and the reality is, and it's hard to say, but they probably wanted it more than us, which is really frustrating. So look, I'm expecting to see a reaction from the players this week. Likewise, obviously we know it's going to be tough against Edinburgh Accies. We're probably going to get a backlash of them getting beat 41-0 last week. So team selection wise this week, Luke Petty and Zen Swargowski will return to the front row. Petty's obviously, Luke will still be on a late fitness test, so that'll still be decided. Donald Nichol will return this week, which is great to see. Donald's obviously not played this year, so he returns after playing 80 minutes for the seconds last week. James Head and Andrew McComb unfortunately miss out through injury, and we might see Ross Nixon getting moved into the back row this week. Backs wise, obviously welcome back Craig Jackson after he played for Edinburgh last week against the 20s, which is great to see. And Ben Pickles and Callum Anderson, they'll both miss out. Well, Ben obviously is part of the Super Six draft, so Ben, Russell Anderson, Alan Ferry will take no longer more part in the season, and Callum misses out through, he picked up an injury last week as well. So look, we're in a positive place. We know we've got to be more clinical, and it's something that I've spoke about and mentioned on the show every week in terms of we're looking for to be more consistent over 80 minutes, and we'll certainly have to do that on Saturday to turn over Edinburgh Accies. But we know how important this week is, especially with Mar playing Glasgow Hawks below us. So it's really vital that we pick up points on the road.
Quite a season for Selkirk at the moment, a bit dodgy at home, but magnificent away.
Yeah, this is a huge game, and I think it's even bigger now after the result of the weekend, because there was an opportunity to just jump up ahead of Edinburgh Accies and perhaps put a little bit more pressure on them, because I feel that the pressure is slightly off Selkirk. Probably before last weekend. I think it's back onto them now, because it was off them at the start, because nobody really expected much of them after the season they had last year. They've recruited really well. I think you can now start to see the impact that Scott White is having on the squad. They're quite well coached. I think that they've got an identity, they've got a purpose when they play. It was evident from the game we covered that I watched them against Jed Forest. They didn't really let that game ever slip out their grasp, but they'll be disappointed with last weekend. But Musselburgh have had a little bit of a reshake up as well, but in terms of like Badenhorst has went back to them, so they have got some really key players coming back to them, which they're able to utilise for the longevity of the season, because I think there's reports that he's not going back to Super 6. But Selkirk missed out key personnel last week. I think it's one of those games that you can afford in a season, because it's a long sprint. But you look at that this weekend again in the Premiership. We talk about the leagues and how exciting they are, and you look at the fact that Edinburgh Accies are playing Selkirk, which is 3rd v 4th, and then if Mar are playing Hawks, then that's 5th versus 6th, and that is starting to go to narrow slightly, because in terms of points difference, there's only 7 points separating Hawks from Edinburgh Accies. So this is where points are critical to get your elbows out towards the top of that league.
And Mar really coming up on the rails now.
Yeah, and I think they've benefited from welcoming back some fresher, fitter players. They've been riding on the crest of a wave for a few years, and it always happens. A team sets the standard, and everybody else has to try and match up to them. What Mar have done this season is, because of their success, people have poached their players to Super 6, and then they've not been able to keep the height. What's been a great plus for them is they're still able to maintain their place in this race. A lot of other teams and clubs might have just fell by the wayside, but they've still been able to maintain pace at the top to get in the playoffs and make a fist of it come the end of the season. But I certainly wouldn't rule out them or Hawks just now, but I would love to see Selkirk manage to get in the playoffs. And I don't think it's just for a Borders point of view. I think they've been due a little bit of a kind of a success towards the top end of amateur rugby for a wee while.
Well, also in the Premiership, Jed Forest travelled to Stony Hill to face bottom club Musselburgh, which our colleague Robin Purdy has described as a cup final. And he's not far wrong as well. Absolutely vital 8 or 9 or 10 pointer to get a win in this game to get clear of that relegation zone. Here's head coach Andrew Brown.
Last week was massive for us. With 65 minutes gone, it was a game we should have lost. 6 weeks ago, we would have lost it. So to come away with 5 points was massive. Everyone in the squad performed. Massive squad performance. But like I say, the work rate from Finlay Scott, Matt Atkinson getting us over the gain line, the whole back row in Gary Young, Ben McNeil, and Ben Fotheringham was huge. And then right through the back line, Gary Munro, Robbie Houston was solid. Greggy Young was excellent. Callum Young was everywhere. So no, it was a great performance. We knew, like we've been saying over the last few weeks, that we've had our tough run. We've played we've had our clashes with the top of the table, and we knew how we were performing that would give us the win. So over the next few weeks now, it comes into competing against the teams in and around about us, which is the challenge ahead, and that's who we're competing against. This week has its own challenges. Obviously, Musselburgh on a high at home after a massive win against Selkirk, and obviously sort of still in touch with us. So they'll be definitely targeting this game to win. We know what they're about. They've got a big park. We know they want to play. but we also know how we're playing and how we want to play, and when we get it right and when we move the ball, then we know we can score tries. We're almost an unchanged team this week, so we should go with the same front row. Clark Skeldon's back available, so he'll be in the second row and captain, alongside Matthew Atkinson. The back row will be the same as last week in Ben McNeil, Gary Young and Ben Fotheringham. Aidan Bambrick took a knock last week, so he won't be available. So Rory Marshall will start at 9, Gary Munro will start at 10, with Robbie Houston and Greggy Young in the centres. Lewis Young comes in for the unavailable Mason Cullen, so he'll be starting at 14, Sherry Gibbett at 11, and Callum will start at 15. Elliot Lodder, John Story, Don Buckley are all back available this week and in the mix. So yeah, we've got decisions to make as to who's on the bench. But another massive week for us. These next two games, Musselburgh and Accies are huge for us. But we'll go into them positive and we'll give it a go.
Well, they certainly put in a fantastic performance last week to win at Hawks with 33 points, coming good in the end, scoring some match points for the first time in a while, and then finding out Musselburgh also collected 5 points at Selkirk. So Heriot's Blues in the mix down there now as well. We've got Musselburgh up to 15 points, Heriot's 21, and then Jed and GHA on 23. Then there's a bit of a gap above them as well. But there's 16 points only difference between Jed and GHA on 23. So points absolutely vital.
Yeah, it is equally as tight at the bottom as it is at the top, and you can see there that, I think that's a disappointing weekend for Jed. It was such a great result to get that win, especially in the manner and especially in the week that it was as well. It was a big weekend for them after the club suffered such a big loss in personnel, and they loved getting the 5 points, but Musselburgh have just kept that league really, really tight at the bottom. They've 6 points away from Heriot's Blues towards the bottom there, and yeah, you look up and Jed Forrest and GHA are still in the mix, and you do wonder how Musselburgh are the drivers in this, because if they continue from what they originally set out, their original form, if they can go back to that kind of reset, then they'll end up being in trouble, and other teams will pick up points here and there. But if they pick up off the back of their performance against Selkirk, it's going to be a really interesting relegation battle, because all those teams that we've just mentioned are in it.
Well, let's get back into National 1, and top of the table is still Kelso, who have home comforts against Dundee, who conceded 50 plus points at home to Kelso a few weeks ago. And we can now hear from player coach Bruce McNeil.
Yeah, so this weekend we see Dundee come down to Poynter Park. We know that they're a threat, simple as that. We know what they're all about. We beat them fairly convincingly up there a few weeks ago, but we know that they were missing 3, 4, possibly 5 key players. They're a very proud team. It's not often they get beat by more than 50 points, so we know that they're coming down to try and make amends from that last result. We just need to focus on our game, work on the negatives that we had against Aberdeen, and make sure we kind of right some wrongs. We've yet to put in that 80-minute performance. I know every kind of coach strives for that, but it's once we can do that, me and Kev will be slightly more pleased. We seem to do it in kind of spells here and there, but then we'll always seem to let other teams into the game, which is slightly disappointing from a coach's point of view. But yeah, listen, there's a big farmers' meal on at Poynter, and hopefully we can put on a decent performance for them. But we're absolutely under no illusion that this is going to be a massive challenge for us. Team-wise, we have Angus Common coming into the second row, Cammy Thompson moves to the back row, Grant Shields comes onto the bench having missed last weekend, Jimmy Roberts comes into the wing, and Nick Single moves to 15 with Greg Ponton going on at the bench. So we're fairly strong, we're fairly settled. We just brought in a bit more experience this week and a bit more muscle just to try and take away some of the threats that Dundee will pose to. So yeah, listen, we're really looking forward to it, but I'm absolutely under no illusion that this is going to be a very tough game, and it's one that we're looking forward to.
Well, of course, Director of Rugby Neil Hinnigan is always wary of any opposition, not taking any of the sides he's played against lightly, and the same for Bruce there.
Yeah, I think it was nice to hear Bruce there, because I think Neil Hinnigan's probably still talking about relegation and having his mind games, but they've been really good, they've been consistent, obviously only losing that one game so far this season. They've got the 11 wins, and I think it's interesting because Kelso were the kind of the same last year. They were there or thereabouts, but just injuries kind of meant that they couldn't really push on. Where you kind of flipped the coin this year. Gala and Kelso have almost been like ships in the night. They've passed each other, and Kelso have given themselves a great platform to push on and really, really start realistically thinking about getting that promotion place, because they've set the platform now. They've done most of the hard work. It's a matter now of managing the squad, rotating the players. But definitely what Bruce is saying there, the fact that they're letting teams back in the game will be a worry. But they'll need to be in these battles. They'll need to go through these hard moments to make sure that they can live up to it when these big moments come later on in the season.
Well, Melrose go to Inverleith to take on Stumel, who they beat comfortably in the end at the Greenyards last month after a close first half, as we said. Stumel have been good at most of their home matches, losing narrowly to Biggar, Highland and Dundee in games they could easily have won. Here's head coach Bert Grigg.
Yeah, so we travel up to Stuart's Melville this weekend. Obviously played them 2 or 3 weeks ago at home, so we know that they're certainly a more capable team than what their league position suggests, and I'm sure it's going to be a tougher test, and teams get up for playing against teams like Melrose at the top of the league, so they'll be looking at it as an opportunity for them to pick up some points this side of Christmas, but also for us, we need to keep that momentum going. We've got Stuart's Melville away and Watson's away this side of Christmas. That for us, we need to keep that momentum going and pick up points before the Christmas break. Obviously last week we got probably a good result versus Stirling, made up for sort of that early season loss, but there was a lot of bits in our performance there that were a little bit disappointing, especially in the first half, but really kicked on in the second half, and it was good to see the sort of final result. Arguably could have been a little bit more. So this week, a few changes in the back line, unfortunately, due to injury. Bruce Colvin misses out this week due to injury, and Doug Crawford returns from Dubai with an injury as well. So Ewan Lindsay gets a start at scrum half. David Colvin also picked up an injury. He'll be out for the next wee while. So Harry Mikowski moves to 15, and Robin Sharp takes up a starting spot on the wing. Donald Crawford returns to play at 13, and the Canadian Mitch Richardson playing at 12. Quite exciting to see how the back three goes. Really electric boys that have got a bit of go about them, but also up there making sure that our forwards give us a good platform to play off of.
Well, a good season for Melrose so far. A few key people missing, but they should be strong enough to come away with at least 4 points, then they'll be targeting 5.
Yeah, Melrose are on a great run of form at the moment. They've been putting in some really impressive performances. I go back to the one against Gala. They were so clinical. They were like really, really impressive behind the scrum, but the pack was equally as good. I think up front they were, really bullied Gala, set the platform up for the likes of Hutchison and the Colvins to rip up. But Mitch Richardson in the centre was a standout player for me. He's, I think, got another 2 weeks. He's got another couple of games to play for Melrose, and they'll try and squeeze every last bit of class out of him before he goes away, because he was phenomenal. And even listening to Robin covering the game last weekend when we got the second half, everything was coming back as Mitch Richardson's run a great line, and he's running these acute angles and just creating space for his teammates. So it'll be, he'll be a loss to Melrose, but he'll certainly be fighting for the cause, because obviously Melrose were able to avenge that big defeat against Stirling County in the opening game of the season, and they keep touch at the top with Kelso and snuggled in between here.
Well, next up we look at National 2, and Peebles, who are now in 4th, are away at Cartha Queen's Park, who are at the bottom end of the table, but on their day can spring a surprise, 52-7 recently against Boroughmuir, for instance. Here's head coach Ian Chisholm.
Really happy with how last week went. If you'd asked us at the start of the week, would we take a 21-14 win? We would have probably said yes, and that might surprise a few people considering where we are. But look, we just come off the back of 2 defeats, and we needed to build a bit of confidence back into how we were playing. And look, I'm absolutely positive that we did that. We started the game really well. We probably defended too narrow in that first 20 minutes, and that allowed Hamilton to expose some of our weaker areas on the edges, and they probably found some of our front row defending where they didn't want to be defending. But look, we made them work really hard for their scores, and like Hamilton, they played rugby. They played a lot of rugby. They played a lot of 10. They ran the ball back from deep, and look, they've got some dangerous players, and I'm really surprised to see them down at the bottom of the table there, and I'm hopeful.
goal, and I've got a lot of respect for how they play the game. I'm hopeful that they'll pick up a few more wins and start heading up the league, because I think it's up to clubs and coaches to play positive rugby like they were trying to play. We allowed Hamilton to go 14-0 up, and before we actually really got a good go of it. But when we did, we were dominant, and we speak every week about the breaking point, and the breaking point was probably about 35 minutes here, where our scrum began to get dominance. We started to make a lot of line breaks. We started to hold onto the ball for a long time, and that's been probably one of the issues for us over the last wee while, is that we're coughing up ball way too easy. And last weekend we made a lot of errors in that first half, and that allowed Hamilton to stay in our 22 for a long time. And look, we were forcing offloads in our own 22 when we should have just put boot to ball. And there were other opportunities for us to play down in their half early and just chip away at them. And look, that was probably reflective of we attempted 32 offloads, and the majority of them came in the second half when things had opened up a wee bit. But look, that tells me that we're trying to play. But at the same time, we made 18 skill errors, which is still really high. But for us to still be able to win and still have that ambition and being brave with the ball. Look, I'm really pleased with that. And the most pleasing thing overall is that we went from conceding 19 penalties last week to conceding 5. And again, a massive respect. What have you must go to our senior playing group and just our players in general. We challenged them at the start of the week to firstly, let's find a way to sort our discipline, because it's killing us, and it's costing us league points. This week we've got a full team, and last week we had a full team. So excited about this weekend, and I'm really hoping that we continue to play the type of rugby that we did last weekend. I really do believe that second half was the best rugby we've played, and I said to the coaching team afterwards that that's the first time this season that I've looked at us as an attack and as a defence and said, look, that looks like a team that's coached by me, and I'm really chuffed about that. So squad this weekend to play Cartha Queen's Park. Number 1, Andrew Brown. 2, Andrew Muir. 3, John Gray. 4, Lewis Copeland. 5, Ross Brown returns after having a wee boy Hamish. 6, Rob Harrison keeps his place in the back row. He was brilliant last weekend. He got his hands on ball a lot, and I think he really wanted to show me that he wants to stay in the back row. Jay Coltman moves from the second row into the back row, and Finlay Sinclair keeps his place after another good show in there. In the back line, Caelan McKeever, he was electric last weekend, and he brings a lot. He really pushed the tempo as much as he could and controlled a lot of our game for us. Donald Anderson also stays at 10. He looked like a wee 16-year-old boy playing last weekend, running with the ball. He even made 8 tackles and 0 misses, and look, that I'm not trying to be funny, but I think that's a massive confidence booster and a massive well done for Donald. He's 36. He's working just as hard as anybody. He trains really well, and he asks a lot of questions, and he's really vocal, and I'm really chuffed with what we're getting out of Donald at the moment. James Dow was a busy man last weekend. He keeps his place in the back 3 alongside Buster Davidson and David Collins. So David Collins, he added so much to our counter attack and just our wide attack, and something that he probably does need to work on is just being that floating attacker and having that free rein and just trying to ID space and almost make his best guess as to where the ball's going to be moved and try and create overloads that way. But in counter attack, he was cutting Hamilton open, and I can't wait to see that again this weekend. In the centres, Jack Harrison and Frey McKeever keep their spots, while on the bench, John Napier, Willie Aitken and Russell Brown is promoted from the Reds after a few good weeks of training and performances, and our final substitute to go on the bench is to be confirmed. We're 4 points minimum, and we just stay in the hunt and look forward to Kirkcaldy to finish off our Christmas break before we almost go into a mini pre-season just over that Christmas break, where the boys will be working hard, because it is a really key time of year that shapes what happens after Christmas.
Ian Chisholm, of course, head coach of Peebles. Now, Berwick are down to 9th from 5th in the space of one game. That's how close things are at the moment, with 4 clubs on 26 points. And they're back at home after a heavy loss at Newton Stuart last week. We can hear from Berwick coach Paul Pringle.
So after the heavy defeat away at Newton Stuart last week, this week we'll welcome Hamilton to Scremerston. Last week was a very disappointing day, as you can imagine. We had some good individual performances, but as a team, at best, we were probably shambolic. The lads have worked really hard in training this week to put things right, and we would hope to carry that into the game this Saturday. The squad itself, we're awaiting a number of late fitness tests. We lost Ali Grieve, our number 8, within the first 5 minutes last week. He'll be out this week, but we would hopefully get him back before Christmas. The Darren Goodfellow will return, which is a big boost to the pack. And then over and above that, we'll have to see how the late fitness tests go. It'll be a hard game. We know from playing Hamilton earlier in the season that they're strong in the centres, and they have a good pack. So we're expecting a tough day, but we would certainly expect to get things back on the road.
Well, he certainly didn't mince his words, did Paul Pringle, about last week's performance. But how close and how crazy is this league, National 2? 4 teams on 26 points, 5 going down this season, just the one promotion up for grabs. This is certainly going to be a scrap to see who survives the drop into National 3. And Berwick targeting revenge for their defeat at Hamilton, but they're in their happy place at Scremerston.
The league itself is very tight. A lot of teams have been taking points off of one another. You can see that even, Peebles are on 39 points. They're only 9 points above the teams who are deemed to be in the relegation battle. And when Ian Chisholm's saying that this is an important period, it's an important period for every single team in that league, because 2 defeats could completely change the complex of your season. You look at Peebles, 2 defeats for them could see them just a little bit too far away from the promotion places, and then starting to look at a relegation battle, because they'll want to stay away from that too. Berwick, if they lose 2 on the bounce, then all of a sudden they're really dragged into a relegation battle, because it's tight at the bottom. And obviously, as we say, the teams from 8th to 12th go down a division essentially, or get repurposed, and there's only one going up. So it's a really, really interesting league. It's a surprising league at times as well. People's, to hear Ian Chisholm saying that he was happy about the result, I think shows that the changes that they've had over the last few weeks in their run of form. So to manage to kind of steady the ship and only stay 4 points behind Glasgow Accies at the top of the table is pretty good after only winning 1 game in 3. So they'll be happy that they could steady the ship and get back on it. But Berwick will be looking to try and get another win at home at Scremerston and nudge up the table a little bit and try and push the others back into that relegation fight.
Well, into East League 1, and Duns visit Forrester. No match for unbeaten Langham, but Hoyt Lindeen travel to face Linlithgow. Now, Lindeen are still at the bottom of the table, but they have been playing better as of late. And, we reckon that they're going to get that elusive win very, very soon. Here's Lindeen's Gary Alexander.
We're off to Livingston this Saturday. Won there back in January, which was a great win for us last season. Since then, we played them at the Volunteer early season back in September. We're on the end of a heavy defeat. They've vastly improved since the season before, so there's no doubt going up there will be a tough game for us on the road, especially as we picked up a few more knocks last week. The big one being our captain, Dave Montgomery. He's no long back for an injury. He picked up a leg knock, so he'll be a big miss. But we'll just get on with things and take this encouragement we got out of last week against Dalkeith. I mean, we really were in the game. It was close all the way through. Although we were always behind, we were always in it. Got back to 4 points down with a few minutes to go, and we're chasing that elusive try that might have sneaked the victory, but got turned over, and a penalty for Dalkeith meant that they clinched it 23-16 in the end. But it was, as I say, some encouraging signs. We played really well in phases. Young Owen Gray came on as a replacement 10 for Hoyt Youth. Had a great game. Scored a lovely support try. Kicked the conversion and kicked a penalty as well. So good signs. Young boys coming through. But as I say, we'll go up to Livingston and give it our all. We'll have a bit of fun to do it because it's a Christmas jumper bus. So hopefully we'll have a good day all round.
Also in East 3, Gala YM, who posted a convincing win last weekend. They're due to face Lismore. Their coach is Stuart Walker.
Last weekend was a real positive for us against Inverleith. Bounced back from a couple of really challenging weeks and pulled together a performance which we were all really, really pleased with. We managed to have a full squad, which we haven't had in a while. Injuries coming back in. We managed to pull together as close to a complete performance as we've had all year, so we were delighted. Looking to this weekend, Lismore beat us last time up there, and really want to put in a much better performance as we did last time against them. It'll be difficult and challenging. They'll be looking to bounce back from a couple of losses as well, and we're looking forward to it. The squad-wise, very similar to last weekend. We managed to come through it pretty much unscathed, so I was pleased with that, and hopefully we can have a repeat of last week.
Stuart Walker. Well, Earlston are also at home and they play Inverleith. Captain Aaron Patterson is hoping they'll be too strong against the league's bottom club.
Good chance for us to right all the wrongs that we made last week. Sort of discipline out, sort of penalties, sort of structure, but a lot of good things moving forward. Plenty of numbers at training this week, so we've had a good opportunity to work on things. A good opportunity to get a win against Inverleith this weekend. It would be good going into Christmas to get another win in the league, build a bit of momentum going into the new year and get boys really positive for coming back in the new year. Go after it going into 2023. Inverleith, we played them once before. Definitely a winnable game for us. If we show up and play the rugby, we know we can. Last time we played them, I can't mind what the score was. I think they beat us by a try or two, but we're looking to completely change that around this time and really go after it.
Aaron Patterson. I mentioned that the Kelso Ladies game against RDVC is off in Women's Caledonia West East Division 1, which means they will pick up the points, but 4 of their games this season have been called off, meaning they've only played 4 games all season.
You know, it's difficult to try and get the buy-in because there's not been a historic buy-in to rugby in this region. It's been such a male-dominated sport, and you know they're trying. And I think that's a great thing about Kelso Ladies is that they're trying to get that environment, get the word out there that it's an opportunity for females to play rugby in the Borders, and you know, and trying to make a success of it. Sometimes you can't help it if other teams or you know things come in the road, and you're not able to fulfil your fixtures, but I think it's a work in progress. Everybody wants everything settled overnight. Everybody wants it done yesterday. You know, if realistically for female rugby and women's rugby, it's going to be a building process. You have to really nurture it, you know, and ingrain it at a lower level, a younger level, and then that will start filtering through. You can't expect, you know, to invite 25, 26, 27-year-old females to a club and expect it to just boom, because there's not the numbers there. It has to be a culture. It has to be born into all the clubs in the Borders to make it sustainable. But, you know, Kelso, they had a good start to their season, and they'll be looking to try and keep going, but unfortunately just some things out with their control sometimes take over and mean that the fixtures can't be fulfilled.
But that's the worrying part, isn't it? It's not the fault of Kelso Ladies in this case, because they're not the ones calling them off. It's other clubs elsewhere. But it is frustrating, isn't it, when you want to play rugby and you're then offered 4 games in the whole season. So you can understand why players would think, well, this isn't for me because they can't offer me any game time.
Yeah, but then I think you look at the female World Cup, like the Women's World Cup, which was in New Zealand, and the final was a great level of rugby. Like, it was really physical, it was a good game, but sometimes the appetite might not be there. Like, sometimes you need to be realistic and say, do we have the numbers to actually have something sustainable in Scotland? It might be that we don't. It might be, instead of thinking 3-4 years time, it might be 10-15 years, but people have to stick with it and support it. And, you know, in terms of, you know, there'll be not a lot of platforms in Scotland that promote women's rugby at all, apart from the national platform, but you're doing it here in terms of, you know, raising awareness so that people know that it's available in the region. So it's something that will take a bit of time to grow and develop, but hopefully it does, and hopefully, in, you know, sitting here in 10 years' time, that all the Borders clubs have some sort of female representation at their club, and it'd be great to see, and we could have perhaps a competitive Borders league.
But that's just about it for today. Don't forget Borders Rugby Radio coming to you live from Netherdale tomorrow, weather permitting, but we're standing by in case we need to go somewhere else. But at the moment, full commentary of Gala versus Ayr with Bruce Miller and Graham Dodds and the rest of the team out and about as well. But for now, from Dale and me, bye-bye for now.